Welcome to this installment of the Mental Health Program. Today I'm joined by Dr. Sammy Mack, licensed clinical psychologist, and Dr. Kathy Von Hippel, licensed clinical psychologist with Alaska Telepsychology. Thanks for being here with us.
Happy to be here.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Let's just jump right into it here. For new parents that have questions on whether they have a special needs child, may need some professional consultation, what's the first thing that they should do?
The first thing they should do is talk to their pediatrician. With young kids, they have wellness checks at regular intervals, at birth, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months, and then those get stretched out with more time as kids get older until eventually in elementary school it's like an annual. So if the appointment is scheduled pretty frequently, you can wait until the next appointment. If it's going to be a while, it's probably a good idea to write to your pediatrician on their portal and ask your question, like, gee, do I need to be concerned that blah, 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 blah. My son is nearly 19 months and not talking. And you'll get an answer back right away. Typically, the pediatrician really has been tracking your child for so long that they have a qualitative, kind of an intuitive sense of whether the kid is on target or not. And so that person's really the best for initiating the process of seeking additional help.
Great. And when the child is born, they're going in to see their pediatrician frequently, right? Maybe every month, 3 months, 6 months. So say, like, for example, at 19 months, they may not see their doc for another 6 months. Mm-hmm. What is, maybe, what's a reference that they can use, maybe online or a book or something like that, to help gain some guidance?
Yeah, the Academy of Pediatrics, I.E.P, online is a wonderful resource. They have kind of elaborated on the quick and dirty assessment that your pediatrician might do, asking about ages and stages. And they're a wealth of information about typical child development. And there they cite evidence-based data about where your child should be, and they have a wealth of resources, even some local resources that they cite.
The I.E.P.
Mm-hmm, the Academy of Pediatrics.
Right.
They have a great book that I used to give this to everyone who had a baby, because the book you'll look it up, like a fever or a runny nose or whatever. You look up the symptom and it says, if this, no action necessary. If this, call your pediatrician. If this, go to the ER. And it's actually bizarrely reassuring to be able to grab a book and look it up in the dead of the night when you're really tired. So, maybe younger parents can quickly find that information online. Maybe some people would like to still have the paper book.
So, yeah, in that respect, they'll talk to their doctor. Most likely, where is the doctor going to refer them to? Who's the psychological professional that most likely they'll be seeing first?
Sammy, do you want to go?
Child psychologists typically are a wonderful resource, but there's also programs for infants and children, the I.E.P program, and they really capture any concerns of early childhood. So they have teams of people that can come into your home, complete evaluations, and then provide services if a child qualifies.
How would someone get in contact with the I.E.P program?
The point of contact would always start with the pediatrician and the pediatrician's team, and that's kind of what opens the door to these services is getting a referral from the pediatrician. If they're a little bit older, the school district as well. Even a 3-year-old can get services, early intervention, special education services through the school district.
Right. So the program for infants and children, they're really helping with speech and they're helping with gross motor development. And so they'll follow kids until age 3, and then they basically transfer them into the school district. And kids with special needs can go into the school district special ed preschool, where they have teachers, but they also have occupational therapists and speech therapists who work with them in a preschool setting, which is actually really fun, and get them ready so they're better prepared for kindergarten.
So that's a great point. And, preschool. What age do the kids start going to preschool where they would be able to get into one of these programs?
3. It's 3 till 5. I think occasionally there are kids who make it to 5.5 or so, but there's that age cutoff for the school district. But most kids start kindergarten at age 5.
And typically in a school district, there are like designated locations with the special education for preschool, correct? It's not necessarily in all elementary schools. It's specific locations, right?
But it's also the case that you can get special ed support at every school. The special ed preschool is a particular program that lives in one location, couple locations, but there's support in all of the schools. There's a lot of kids who make it into kindergarten and no one's really realized that they have difficulties. We very often see this, Sammy and I see this with first children. So, the parents have no reference. So to them, it seems like their kid is developing really normally until they start spending a lot of time with around other kids, and they start to see like, whoa, wait a minute.
This is a little different than what I'm used to seeing.
Yeah, and then kindergarten teachers will typically call it, by Christmas time or so. They'll say, hey, something's wrong here. We need an evaluation.
Mm-hmm. So as someone that's not very well, I'm not informed on a lot of that stuff. I know there's a lot of talk with parents about separating children with special needs or integrating with the, I don't want to call it normal, but with the standard classroom. How is that playing out currently in, maybe the United States or whatnot? I mean, is it trending one way or another, or is it sort of depends on the school district or what in regards to integrating and separating?
We're trending towards inclusion, meaning that we would like all of the children to be together, to find a way for all the children to be together successfully, and what can the adults do to support kids with special needs so they can be successful in a mainstream classroom. There's this law called the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it essentially says that everyone has the right to education in the least restrictive environment. And so that can look really different for different kids. Sammy, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so the least restrictive environment, there's kind of a graduated process. Some kids need to go into a self-contained classroom where there's a very small parent or student-to-teacher ratio. It's maybe 1-to-2 or 1-to-3, and it's just children with special needs. And then over time, they'll typically try to pull the child out of the self-contained classroom and put them in a mainstream classroom for part of the day and sort of graduate them up until they're in the mainstream classroom for most of the day with or without a one-to-one tutor.
And this is kind of a broad question, but I mean, typically, how long does that take? I mean, I'm sure it's case-to-case basis, but is it usually by K1, 2, I mean, what do you normally see with kids that sort of get on the radar and are, involved in a special ed preschool program? How long does it normally take for them if they are, initially separated and back to the mainstream?
Right. It really depends on the need of the child and also when the problem was identified. I mean, over and over again, we know from the literature that early intervention is best. And sometimes, if a kid is identified at 2.5 and gets into the program for infants and children and then off into the school district, that's when gains can be made more quickly. But it really depends on the severity and when the problem is identified. And also if the child is able to access supports outside of school as well. Yeah. You have the school district-based team that operates during the school hours, and then there are private services available or state-funded services available in the after-school weekends all summer long hours.
Yeah, that's right. And Marty, a lot of times parents are reluctant to avail their child of services available at school, and because they're concerned maybe the kid will never get out of services. But there's this really helpful process where kids are reevaluated every 3 years if they have an individualized education plan. And the point of that is for the whole school team and the parents and the student to check in and see if services are still needed. And if they are needed, to update the service plan and make sure it's appropriate. So everyone would love for kids not to need to have an individualized education plan. That would be better for kids, of course, if they were not having challenges. But there's support available until they exit or graduate from services.
Let's touch a little bit on the individualized program. Is that kind of a mandatory program that's involved with each child that's been accepted into a special education program? Every child has an I.E.P that's accepted into the special needs or preschool or elementary schools? Or
Sammy, you want to take this?
If a child qualifies for the program, if they meet the criteria, then yes, they have an individualized education plan, which follows them throughout their school experience until the point which they conduct their 3-year re-eval. They do the assessments and say, well, they're not having any impairment in the class. They're learning okay. Their social skills aren't impaired. They're talking well. Our work is done. And then in that case, they would sort of graduate from an individualized education plan. But once it's in place, they are then on the hook for continuing to reevaluate and follow that child.
And what would constitute a child qualifying for an I.E.P?
Yeah, there are certain qualifying conditions. And but the basic idea is something has to make it really hard for the child to learn. So an example would be a learning disorder or an intellectual disability or autism. And so in general, to have an I.E.P, an individualized education plan, you need individualized instruction. So you need a teaching assistant or a special educator to present material in a different way, or to coach you through the curriculum or through the activities of daily school. And so you need a higher level of support.
That's great. That's great. And I think that's really important to have the capacity to seek support and professional guidance, especially given all the technology. I mean, everybody has a smartphone, and, I think just getting the right information into people's hands that need it